Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Bhalava Girivanadhari Gopi Jana Bhalava Girivanadhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Sata Srimad Abhay Charanar Vinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Sata Srimad Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinata Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Readings from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 21, Text 18. Guess that's up there? Yeah? Okay. Na te jaraksha brahmir ayur esham. Brahmir ayur esham. Trayo dasaram trisatam shasti parva. Samnemyananta chariyatrinaabhi. Karalasroto jagad achijadavat. Nate jaraksha brahmir ayur krisham. Trayo dasaram trisatam shasti parva. Sanemyananta chariyatrinaabhi. Karalasroto jagadachidya-davat. Gentlemen, Nate jaraksha brahmirayur esham. Trayo dasaram sri satam shasti parva. Sanemyananta chariyatrinaabhi. Davan. Karasroto jagadachidya-davat. Doesn't really fit, but it's okay. I know. Oh, sorry. Yeah, but the meter on that last line doesn't quite fit into that. Anyway, do your best. It's okay. Tate jaraksha brahmir ai esham. Trayo dasaram srirara sasti parva. Nanemi anantarirabi. Kala turbo jagadachidya-davat. Anybody else on that side? Ladies? Nate jaraksha brahmir ayur esham. Trayo dasaram trisatam shasti parva. Sanemyananta chariyatrinaabhi. Karalasroto jagadachidya-davat. Anybody else? In the back 40 there? Okay. Na, not. Te, your. Ajara, of imperishable Brahman. Aksha, on the axle. Brahmi, rotating. Ayu, span of life. Esham, of the devotees. Trayodasha, 13. Aram, spokes. Trisatam, 300. Shasti 60. Parva functions. Sat 6. Nemi rims. Ananta innumerable. Chadi leaves. Yat which. Tree 3. Nabhi naves. Kurala Shrota with tremendous velocity. Jagat the universe. Achidya cutting short. Davat running. Translation and purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Your wheel, which has 3 naves, rotates around the axis of the imperishable Brahman. It has 13 spokes, 360 joints, 6 rims, and numberless leaves carved upon it. Though its revolution cuts short the lifespan of the entire creation, this wheel of tremendous velocity cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. Please repeat. Your wheel, which has 3 naves, rotates around the axis of the imperishable Brahman. It has 13 spokes, 360 joints, 6 rims, and numberless leaves carved upon it. Though its revolution cuts short the lifespan of the entire creation, this wheel of tremendous velocity cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. Purport. The time factor cannot affect the span of life of the devotees. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that a little execution of devotional service saves one from the greatest danger. The greatest danger is the transmigration of the soul from one body to another, and only devotional service to the Lord can stop this process. It is stated in the Vedic literature, Harim vina na mritim taranti. Without the mercy of the Lord, one cannot stop the cycle of birth and death. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that only by understanding the transcendental nature of the Lord and his activities, his appearance and disappearance, can one stop the cycle of death and go back to him. The time factor is divided into many fractions of moments, hours, months, years, periods, seasons, etc. All the divisions in this verse are determined according to the astronomical calculations of Vedic literature. There are 6 seasons called ritus, and the period of 4 months called chaturmasya. 3 periods of 4 months complete 1 year. According to Vedic astronomical calculations, it is actually 13 months. The 13th month is called Adi Masa or Mala Masa, and is added every 3rd year. The time factor, however, cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees. In another verse, it is stated that when the sun rises and sets, it takes away the life of all living entities, but it cannot take away the life of those engaged in devotional service. Time is compared here to a big wheel with 360 joints, 6 rims in the shape of seasons, and numberless leaves in the shape of moments. It rotates on the eternal existence, Brahman. So, as always, I always read the whole chapter so I can get an idea of what this verse, what the context is, and why it's being spoken at this moment. And before this verse, leading up to this verse, Sage Maitreya is explaining to Vidura that Lord Brahma had instructed his son, Kardama Muni, to have many children, and that he should prepare himself before engaging in this very responsible and exalted service of begetting children. And so Kardama Muni went to the banks of the Saraswati River, which is actually no longer existent. At least it's gone underground due to some tectonic plates, or it's perhaps that they're suspecting the Saraswati River is now flowing underground the Thar desert. But it's a river of long ago. It's very well celebrated, but it's not visible to us today. So you'll hear that sometimes quoted, that somebody went to the banks of the Saraswati River. So where is that? So whatever the case is, Kardama Muni, he engaged in a really austere yoga meditation on the banks of this river for 10,000 years. So to purify himself, to please the Lord, and to be blessed, to conceive children who would benefit human society. So it's important to know in this context that this whole pastime happened in a different age, Satya Yuga, which was many years ago, the age of truth. It's also called the golden age. And people's life expectancy was 100,000 years. So meditating for 10,000 years sounds like a long time to us, but actually it was just a 10%, what is it, 10%, 5%, 1% of 100,000 years? So he went into this remote place and built himself a little hut and prepared himself to purify his mind and heart with the goal of conceiving very spiritually divine and capable children. So another characteristic of Satya Yuga is that people lived totally truthfully with the highest moral standards. That's inconceivable to us today, that people, the whole planet was under the influence of the mode of goodness. And they lived completely in harmony with each other. There was never any fighting amongst individuals. There was no war. There was no conflict. It's inconceivable, like we're romantically thinking of that because it's so rampant to us in this age of Kali. And religious practice for that age was deep, silent meditation. It was not the same as our religious practice for this age of Kali. And the whole effort was to contemplate in a way that allowed people to connect with their authentic self, their true selves, in a silent yoga process, probably accompanied with pranayama and some of the practices that we do in the Hatha Yoga system, with an addition of a deep, long period of inner meditation. So in Satya Yuga, every person really understood the purport of the Vedic wisdom. There was no question of having to teach anybody anything because everybody understood the goal of life. There was no social divisions. There were no class distinctions. And everybody just practiced, naturally, Vedic wisdom. They lived in harmony with nature. They lived in harmony with themselves. And everyone, there was no hierarchy because everybody was valued equally. Everyone shared the same values. So very different than how we are today. We are in the age of Kali Yuga. Many of you know the Yuga or millennium that's characterized by quarrel and hypocrisy. So it's very rare in the course of a day not to bump into somebody quarreling about something. You just have to turn on the news if you want to look at some pretty toxic conversations. It's just what it is. So Kardama Muni is referred to in different places as both a sage and a Muni. And they're a little bit of a difference. We use them interchangeably often. But the word Muni refers to an ascetic, someone who practices severe austerities and deep silent meditation in seclusion in the forest or in a cave, far away from human society. They're not living in a social environment. They're just living as far away as they can get from social interaction. A sage, on the other hand, is a wise man, a person who knows the truth of existence, not only in the basis of religious texts, but through personal realization. So, we can say that Kardama Muni was also a sage because it's a both and. He not only was an ascetic, but he actually had realized knowledge. He wasn't artificially practicing silent meditation to achieve something like moksha, freedom from this material world. In a world where everything is harmonious and in the mode of goodness, there's no reason why you would want to leave it. It's just such a pleasant experience. So the purpose is a little different than how we think about trying to free ourselves from human suffering today, because suffering was not so much existent in Satya Yuga. So it's described here, he was a bit of a hermit, Kardama. He lived alone, and his whole focus was to fix his mind and heart on devotional service. So it was a personalized effort. It wasn't an impersonal meditation. It was, focusing on the Lord in his own heart. And through the pure quality of his service to the Lord by focusing on his meditation, this pleased the Lord very much. It's actually explained here in these verses that a person can win the favor of the Lord very quickly just by taking shelter of the Lord for their protection. And it's a really important point to remember from this story. A takeaway is that, if we want to actually please the Lord, we can do that very quickly if we take full shelter of the Lord's protection. So after this long 10,000 years of deep meditation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being very pleased with Kardama Muni for his sincerity and his heartfelt devotion, that he appeared to him suddenly. He was in his meditation, and suddenly the Lord appears, just out of nowhere. Well, he doesn't come from nowhere, but I guess like Nrsingadev came out of a pillar, the Lord can manifest himself anywhere and everywhere. At least within his own mind and heart, the Lord became evident. Not just in his imagination, he was actually there in front of him. And the description is that he appeared effulgent like the sun. He was wearing white lotuses and lilies around his neck, kind of like a garland, like that, probably different color, white. And his hair was dark and curling, so he was seeing a real form of the Lord, and his hair was curling around his face, and he was actually standing on the shoulders of Garuda, the eagle carrier that Lord Vishnu rides on. Every god and demigod has a carrier, some animal that they ride on. It's also described that he was wearing a kaustuba gem, and that literally means in Sanskrit a crest jewel. It's a jewel that is like a divine ruby and considered to be the most magnificent gem in creation. We know, even astrologically, how powerful energetically various stones are. So this divine ruby was a very powerful gemstone that the Lord, he always wears around his chest. And it's a symbol for his divine authority. The story goes that this gem appeared as a result of the churning of the ocean of milk. And that's a totally different story that we're not going to talk about today. But if you read the Bhagavatam, you'll see there was at one point, a churning of the ocean of milk on the back of Kurma, the turtle incarnation. So it's interesting, if you read the Bhagavatam and you start reading the different stories and the various saints and sages in these stories, you'll see that there are several devotees who saw the Lord face to face. And the result of their sincere bhakti, their sincere devotion, was what invited the Lord to appear to them in face to face, in real form. Not in an imagined form. The Lord is actually appearing. He's coming. And the Lord feels so obliged to the devotee who offers service to him in honest, humble service that he just has to reciprocate. And so very few people, but there are several in this Bhagavatam where the Lord actually shows himself. And it's really worth aspiring for in our devotional life. We do so much service, but we might not be thinking, what is the goal of my service? Yes, we want to love Krishna, but there may be at some unimagined time that Krishna will appear to us. It's a wonderful goal, maybe for another lifetime, but to think in terms that Krishna is actually watching, he's actually witnessing. I'm thinking as I talk about this, of the story of the song the Beatles wrote, if you can remember the Beatles. It was at my time. I don't know if anybody in here remembers the Beatles, but George Harrison wrote this song, My Sweet Lord, which was very, very popular. And part of that song was, I really want to see you. I really want to know you. You know, my sweet Lord, but it takes so long. That was the song, My Sweet Lord. It was just a chant. And of course, at the end, he's chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, which made it very popular. There's another mantra, the English version of the Jagannath Swami Nayana Patagami Bhava Tu Me mantra, where the translation is, O Lord of the universe, kindly be visible unto me or to us. It's a wonderful prayer, but you don't think of it in terms of these texts where it's actually conceivable that at some point in our life, maybe not in this life, but in some point in time, it's possible that the Lord will appear to us. He may also appear in a different way. And sometimes the curtain goes up, this curtain of illusion goes up, and we can see something clearly that we haven't seen. We understand something about Krishna being present that we haven't seen before. But that only happens when our heart is in just the right place. And it may not happen all the time. It may happen sometimes that we see things clearly. Other times we don't see it so clearly. But it's a wonderful thought to meditate on these souls who were not really, they weren't really even thinking, well, if I perform sincere service, Krishna will come. It was just a spontaneous surprise that Krishna shows up because he's reciprocating with our service. So anyway, Kardama Muni, when he saw the Lord in this way, he fell on the ground. He just totally was so shocked and so surprised. He fell on the ground and he started to worship the Lord's feet. And his heart naturally, as it would, felt overwhelmed with love for the Lord. And so as a result of that overflowing of love, he starts reciting prayers. He starts to pray and glorify him with his words. I know Dhruva Maharaj, he was such a person too. When if you know the story, he was angry at his father. His father had insulted him, and he wanted to have a kingdom greater than his father's to humiliate him. So he, started to perform these austerities to try and get this planet that would be greater than the father's. And he would fast on leaves, standing on one leg and chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And then just like it happened to Kardama Muni, kaboom, there's Krishna right there. And he falls down and he starts to pray. I suspect that's the proper thing to do. If Krishna ever shows up for you like that, you know what to do now, because we've seen it several times. So here he is praying. O Supreme Worshipful Lord, having attained the greatest perfection by seeing you, my power of sight has been fulfilled. Only yogis absorb themselves, who absorb themselves in deep meditation, aspire to see your transcendental form after many births. That's something, many births, so it's not happening perhaps in one lifetime. And today I have had the privilege of seeing you face to face. And Kardama then says, only persons with no intelligence due to the delusional energy will worship your feet to attain some trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. But you, Lord, are so kind. You even bestow your mercy on them. So desiring to marry a girl of my same disposition, who will satisfy my lusty desires, I also have approached you with austerities and penances, with desire because you are the source of everything and are like a desire-fulfilling tree. So here we see Kardama admitting that, like all other conditioned souls, he's engaging in religious activities to satisfy the Lord so that he can fulfill some personal desire. And this is typically our mood when we approach the Lord, even though we practice bhakti and we know that the goal is to develop unalloyed devotional service. It's very rare that we don't have some little thing that we are desiring. And we're pleasing the Lord because there's a something else on top. So, most people, knowingly or unknowingly, have other needs to be met. Often people will approach the Lord when they're suffering. They've had a terrible loss. Maybe they've lost their job. Maybe their marriage is not doing well. Maybe their children are not doing well. So we're praying, please fix this or fix that. It's kind of and we're willing to do things. You'll see people performing extra mantra chanting or extra austerities so that they can get something or some good luck will happen for them. And so the good news is that's okay, in the sense that God is the source of all things. It's a bona fide thing to go to the Lord for everything. So even if it might not be the highest goal to just please the Lord, even if we have material desires, that's the avenue through which we can get those desires fulfilled. And so if we just keep Krishna at the center and approach the Lord rather than pursuing our desires impulsively and impatiently, trying to get this need met, and I'm so impatient, and when's it going to happen, and I can't wait, and how long do I have to wait to get this desire fulfilled? If we just, like Kardama Muni, 10,000 years is quite a long time. We don't have that much time, right? So, it may well be in the light of Krishna's vision that it may be lifetimes, to consider that maybe you have a desire now that won't be fulfilled in this life, but, hang on, maybe in next life it'll be fulfilled. But my point is that we can see here, he was instructed to have children. He was a Prajapati. That was his job. In all of Brahma's sons, their job was to have tons and tons of children to populate the earth planet or the world. And so in order to have quality children, there's some sacrifice needed, in the sense of, praying for a child that will benefit human society, that will be a blessing to the world. We don't practice exactly the same way that they did this in Satyuga. In our tradition, there's a period of contemplation, there's a period of, preparation, physically even, cleansing our bodies, but also our minds and hearts, not just impulsively running into starting to conceive children randomly in a tent down at Krishna village or down in the backseat of a car, because the result might well be that you don't get the child that you're hoping for, because the consciousness of the parents at the moment of conception determines the kind of child you will have. So it makes a big difference if the husband and wife they're engaging in conceiving children, engaging in family life, in household life, in sex life as a means of service. It's actually yoga practice. And that you're doing a service to human society by inviting souls that are floating around just waiting for the right combination of a man and a woman to receive them into a culture of care and devotion. So it's a great responsibility. It's not a random thing. And sadly, people don't know this, and often, if the consciousness is in a capacity of lust and anger, thinking of rape and those kinds of things, good luck finding the child that comes out being in harmony with your goal of devotional life. Often children are born who are actually enemies of the parents. In your whole life, you're just fighting. They're totally different. They have a different purpose. They have a different goal. So this is a serious thing that Kadamba took up. So when you think of him, he's talking about himself humbly. I was praying to fulfill my lusty desire. Not so much. Just see how exalted he's thinking. When we think of lust, we're thinking like, how do you say, lusty animals. It's not like that. He had a little desire. He wanted to have a really nice, pious, exalted, saintly son, and so he understood the proper avenue to attain that. So no fault there. He performed enormous austerity and pleased the Lord, who came before him and reciprocated with him. So Kardama points out, as he's praying, that persons who have given up stereotyped, mundane, worldly affairs, or the satisfaction of their animal propensities, which is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Now, these are normal activities that we need to fulfill as conditioned souls. But if that becomes your only focus in life, is how do I get food? That's my main thing. How do I get shelter? How do I find a mate? How do I defend it all? You're really not much different than animals. That's a pretty harsh statement. But life is more than that. Of course, we have to take care of the need to eat and sleep and have fellowship, have relationship, have partners and mates and all those things. But if we forget the purpose of it, that we can stabilize ourselves and have a peaceful, steady life so that we can practice spiritual life, we've missed the whole point. So he's saying here that if we just focus on that, rather than listening or drinking the nectar of the pastimes, the glories of the Lord through our ears, to become freed from these necessities of life, we've missed it. And he's explaining also how if we glorify the Lord to our heart's content, that we're satiated in our heart, we will lose that passionate endeavor to just stress about physical necessities of life. So now we come to today's verse. We already read it, but I'm going to read parts of it again. This verse 18. So all of that's leading up and giving you the context of why this is being said. So Kardama, in this verse, he's continuing his glorification of the Lord in so many ways by raising the readers' or the listeners' awareness of his sustaining presence that supports the whole creation. So he's talking about this wheel. Your wheel, which has 3 naves, and if you don't know what a nave is, I certainly didn't, so I had to look it up. The nave of a wheel is the thickest part of the wheel's hub, or the central block that connects the axle to the spokes. So your wheel rotates around the axis of the imperishable Brahman. It has 13 spokes. Now, the 13 spokes are supposed to be like the 13 months, and we'll explain why he's talking 13 months rather than 12. 360 joints. It's actually meant to be 365, but we'll explain in a minute why sometimes there's 13 months and 360 days. 6 rims and numberless leaves carved upon it. Though its revolution cuts short the lifespan of the entire creation, the wheel of tremendous velocity cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. So Kardama is using this wheel as an image or an analogy for the role of the Lord plays in sustaining force in the material creation. The 360 joints represent the 365 days of a year, which is the wheel of time that rotates around year after year and shortens each of our lives. But, as Kardama explains, that even though this unstoppable wheel is shortening the duration of life for all forms of creation, not just humans, it cannot reduce the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. So Prabhupada quotes in this purport the Bhagavad Gita saying that just a little bit of advancement of executing devotional service saves a person from the most significant danger, which is transmigrating from one body to another, birth after birth, in this cycle of samsara. So this is such an important notion, this idea that when we sit here and we listen and talk about the Lord's transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes, we're actually prolonging our life. We are in a karma-free zone. We're not engaging in pious activity, we're engaging in transcendental activity. Pious activity, a lot of people want to perform so they get a good result. People, want to get a higher education so that they can maybe be more successful in life. Maybe they have a good job, they get more money. Maybe they do things to make themselves more beautiful. all of those things are ways to enjoy in a pious way in this world. But when we're sitting here just listening, without any agenda but to hear and to glorify the Lord, that time stops. We are lifted out of this cycle of time, which means we're also lifted out of the cycle of birth and death. And we know from the first cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam how the whole purpose of this literature was to answer Maharaj Parikshit's question, what is a man supposed to do who's about to die? And he had been cursed to die in 7 days. He was bitten by a snake bird. And he knew, I'm dying in 7 days, so what should I be doing? And Sukadeva Goswami said, well, you need to be hearing. Just forget about everything. Give up your kingdom, give up whatever activities you're doing, and just sit down and pay attention and absorb yourself and hearing and talking about the Lord. So that's what we try to do here in the Hare Krishna movement by having classes, by engaging in kirtan festivals. It's just an effort to give us a taste so that eventually our taste grows and that we can absorb ourselves 24/7 in hearing and chanting. And as we engage in this Hare Krishna movement, we actually see that cooking for Krishna is chanting. Distributing books is also chanting. We're distributing books, giving people literature so they can read about Krishna and hear about Krishna. So in this way, we are lifted out of this karma cycle, this cycle of birth and death. It's interesting to note, according to the Vedic astrology, that a year has 12 lunar months. That's how we, in our calendar, we think about the cycle of a year. And those 12 lunar months are based on the cycles of the moon. But in special years, there's a leap month, as talked about in the purport. There's a leap month. It's called Adhik Mas, or Purushottam Mas, month. And it's sometimes added. So every third year, there's kind of an extra month added. If you're counting not 365 days, you're counting 360 days. So we're talking about a totally different calendar to the Western calendar that we use. And so what happens is every third year, there's 13 months in the year, not 12. So I thought that was an interesting piece of information because we don't follow in the Vedic system the same calendar as we do today. There's this nice verse in Bhagavatam, Canto 2, 3:17. Both by rising and by the setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone except one who utilizes their time discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. So anyway, after this, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens after. You're going to have now tomorrow and the next day people talking about the next verses. But what's interesting to note here is that after he said all those things, he felt flat, he praised the Lord in so many ways. He beat his breast about his little material desire, that the Lord, that he was pursuing devotion because he had a desire. But the Lord, he gives him such an incredible response, after he's being praised. He says, don't worry, in another couple of days, you will have your desire fulfilled that you have been working on for the last 10,000 years. That at this very moment, Prajapati Swayambhuva Manu and his wife, Queen Satarupa, they're bringing their grown daughter, who is Devahuti. You'll hear more about in the next month we'll be talking about these stories. And she also has equal qualities to you. She's also quite a yogi. And she's extremely beautiful and very qualified. And she also wants to get married. So they're bringing on their swan carrier, that's how I guess they got around, bringing this beautiful yogic, very spiritually conscious girl to come, and they will offer her to you in marriage. And so he was like dumbfounded because that was not what he was expecting. He'd already beaten his breath. Well, I had performed these austerities because I wanted to have a wife that had qualifications like me, and I'm living in a forest in a hut, and I don't know where I'm going to get one of those. And, if you're living in a hut a long time, you're probably not very well groomed or very attractive. So he's sitting there, and the Lord then flies away on his Garuda airplane. And he's just dumbfounded. And before the Lord goes, he says, as a result of your union, you will have 9 daughters. And in the womb of each one of those daughters, there will be many saintly people taking birth. And after he was completely cleansed by the Lord's instructions, he just sat and waited. And very soon, the Devahuti comes, and we start another pastime. It's just a very beautiful story, and I want to lift up what I take away from this story, and I want each of you to tell me what your takeaway is how responsible married life is. If you're thinking in terms of having children, it's a huge contribution. If you can just imagine 9 children, and out of the womb of each child comes more saintly, realized people. What a different world this would be if we had more children taking birth. And Prabhupada said, when he was on the planet, the children who take birth in the Hare Krishna movement, they are all very special. They're not ordinary children. They're much more evolved because they take birth for a reason. It's not just you desiring a child. The soul who's floating around out there is waiting for a couple or parents who are just suitable for them to continue their spiritual life. So most of the folks who are taking birth in this movement, they have already been practicing bhakti yoga in a previous lifetime, and they're just beginning again, or they're continuing where they left off. So I want to stop here. There's a little time. I would like to hear what takeaways you had. And did you have any new insights that you didn't hear before? You want to add something? Yeah. Yeah. Mainly because there are people at home who are tuning in, and if you don't have a mic, they won't hear you. They won't hear you. Just talk right.
Hare Krishna. You were speaking about the importance of the parent's consciousness in conceiving a child.
Yeah.
So my question's in regards to Prahlad Maharaj, whose father was a great atheist, materialist demon. So what's the explanation behind that?
Well, of course, we know the story is that in the womb, Narada Muni recited to him for that entire time, even though the mother was completely oblivious of the meaning of what Narada Muni was saying. He heard constantly transcendental sound within in the womb. It's a special story too in terms of Prahlad. He's one of the Mahajans, but Prabhupada also compared us to demons, in the sense that we were born into families who were not particularly spiritually conscious, nor were they probably even thinking about how their consciousness is going to affect. So that's a special mercy of Krishna, the power of the sound, the transcendental sound of the name, form, qualities, and pastimes. So, yeah, there's hope for the Pope. Yeah. Anything else? Any other takeaways? Yeah, Sadhana.
I just want to say thank you so much. The class was so thoroughly researched and understandable, and I've got hundreds of questions now.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm sure Julan does too. So my first question will be, there's many of our great devotees in ISKCON that have left early, and they obviously were spending a lot of time in, spreading Krishna consciousness, so why then the wheel let them go early?
The wheel let them go early. I don't know why the wheel let them go early, but don't think Krishna forgets them. Don't think that they're not forgotten. There are many of my god brothers and sisters who weren't living in the temple, and at the moment of their death, they're in a hospice bed in some remote corner of Germany. I joined in Germany. And by God, the devotees show up. Somehow or other, they get Krishna doesn't forget you, even if you forget him. So, I mean, if you have done any kind of service for this movement in terms of spreading the holy name, you're not forgotten.
I appreciate that answer, but I still feel that the class was sharing the knowledge of that if you're Krishna conscious, you get to live a full life. Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
A full life.
Well, I thought that wheel was the time of, spreading.
Well, what this wheel image is just what Kardama Muni, why he was lifting up this wheel metaphor, was that when we absorb ourselves in spiritual kata, then we're lifted out of this cycle. We're not, how do you say, doomed to live in this cause and effect samsara. It's actually, this is such a complex thing that is supporting us, but we're lifted out of it. Time gets suspended when we absorb ourselves in devotional service. That was what the purport of that was. Does that make sense? So the question was, why do?
Well, I thought that would mean that they'd live a full life because they were not covered by time. Anyhow, it's okay.
Somebody help me. What?
It's temporary in the material sense of, it's temporary in the material sense of things, but you're taking into that transcendental realm for that time that it's being
Right, and of course we're kind of mixed devotees, so it's not like we're sitting there for 10,000 years absorbed. We are sometimes absorbed and sometimes we're not, and so we get that result too. It's a mixed bag. But I thought you were asking why do people not live a full life? Well, maybe, but Prabhupada also says that at the moment of conception, your time clock is already there like a battery. You have a certain amount of breaths and heartbeats. It's one reason why yogis go to caves to try to breathe slowly. Maybe I can expand my life. But you're already destined to die at a certain time, and that's decided before conception already. So having a long life doesn't necessarily mean you have a good life. You could be stuck on a ventilator for 20 years, confined to your bed with cerebral palsy. Maybe you better not live so long. I'm not sure living a long life means it's a wanted life, that kind of, like Bhishma, he lived so long, he was so tired of living. It's like, oh my God, he outlived everybody. It's like, I'm so tired of living. I want to die, I'm so tired. Yeah. Any other thoughts or takeaways? Something? Yeah, Julan. Got 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, I had a question actually. In the beginning, you mentioned about seeing the Lord, and actually we are seeing Krishna in his deity form every day. And I was wondering, how can you appreciate deity form of Krishna more, and actually see Krishna in it?
Yeah, good question. In my experience, I can only share that. The portal through which this deity is revealed is the quality of your chanting. So if you really want to see the Lord, you want to chant all your rounds before Mangalarti and come here ready to receive. It's a whole different experience. Rather than, stumbling out of bed and brushing your teeth and throwing water on yourself and coming up here. It's a different experience. Really, honestly. And that's the portal through which we can actually see not just marble and dresses and beautiful garlands, and it's a whole different experience. And then you start to see how Krishna is also appearing. He might not be appearing as what's described here with the garland in his face-to-face form, but there will be little mystical appearances of Krishna showing up in serendipitous ways, just in time. Somebody comes, you all have this experience. It's as a mystical process. You can't make it happen. You can't make Krishna appear, but your heart has to be in that right place. And you can't make that happen. It's a complete grace, kind of thing. All right. Oh, one more time. If you need to go to breakfast, I don't know when they're having breakfast, but you can just sneak out.
Thank you for allowing us to ask our questions. I just thought Kadamba Muni, he got a really direct instruction. And I was just wondering if you can comment on that, because us, I think it would be so good if we just got a direct instruction and then we could work towards it.
Well, some spiritual masters today will give us instruction to a disciple, like, you have a fantastic kirtan voice, just do that. That's your thing, do it. Some spiritual masters may not be as explicit, and you may have to ask. But in the ultimate issue, it's really about checking in with the Lord in our heart, because the initiating guru, Shiksha Diksha guru, they're expressions or external expressions of Cheta guru, who's in our heart. So they're leading us through training back to purification so that we can actually hear, so that we can ask that question and sit with it and pray about it till it's clear. But yeah, we're talking about Satya Yuga. It's a totally different thing, than Kali Yuga.
I just have one more question, because you had such nice explanations. So when we say, you should check any information you get with Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, could you please describe the difference between Sadhu and Guru?
Well, we know from the scriptures that a bona fide guru is someone whose his interpretation of Vedic knowledge is non-different, or the conclusions of Vedic knowledge doesn't disagree with the conclusions that other saintly people, and that would include probably Jesus, in the sense that Prabhupada considered him a Shaktavisha avatar. And the purport is generally at the bottom, unconditional love for God and compassion for all living beings. So a sadhu and a saintly person may not have disciples, but they may be a living example of pure devotion. And so it's this connection, like Arjuna and Krishna in the beginning, they were just friends. They were cousins, and they were hanging around like friends. But at a certain point, Arjuna turns to Krishna and says, now I'm a soul, now you are, then the relationship shifted. And I think that's what happens too. You'll have people who are exemplary Vaishnavas, and then as they teach, people are inspired. You want to be inspired by somebody who answers your anxieties and questions. And often people will come back to you again and again, and they feel satisfied, so they may at some point ask to take shelter. And but that may not happen. Somebody may not at all want to have the burden of responsibility of training a bunch of spiritual children. It's a big job. So I think that certainly a spiritual master who takes disciples, you would expect to be a sadhu, a saintly person who's practicing what he preaches. But a saintly person may not have disciples, formally. Yeah. All right. Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.